Pascal Zerka, over to you.
I'd like to welcome you here this afternoon, and we couldn't have got a nicer afternoon. We are here to honor the achievements and battle of a man we are proud to say lived in Abbotsford, Robert Hanna, the ultimate Commonwealth Medal, the Victoria Cross. As you may or may not know, the Victoria Cross was instituted in 1856 by Queen Victoria. It's the Commonwealth's premier military decoration for gallantry. It's awarded in a recognition of exceptional bravery. Robert Hill Hanna was the 70th person ever to win the VC. That's overall, that's many wars, including the Boer War. Robert was from a town in Northern Ireland, some 90 kilometers from where my mother was born, in Northern Ireland. We are indeed proud and privileged to be here today with his son, Bob Jr. Bob, members of his regiment, the British Columbia Regiment, the Duke of Connaughts, the Abbotsford and Aldergrove Legions, the Matsqui Army, Navy, Air Force veterans, and other military and cadet units, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Abbotsford Police Department, the BC Sheriff's Department, and other veterans. Welcome. I'll start the program by asking Kevin from Mr. Jaddy Sidhu's office to come and say a few words, please.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Sidhu regrets not being able to be here this evening and sends his warmest regards to everyone here celebrating the life of Sergeant Robert Hill Hanna. On behalf of Mr. Sidhu's office and his government, we thank Sergeant Hanna for his great courage and also for his service, not only to his brothers in arms, but to the community of Matsqui, where he settled after the war. We honor his service and memory, and we celebrate the well-lived life and example he set for us all. Sergeant Hanna received the Victoria Cross in 1917, which many of you know as the highest award of the United Kingdom's honor system. He received this award for his heroic actions in Hill 70 100 years ago. This award is linked to the acts of bravery, which we know was instilled in Sergeant Hanna. On behalf of Mr. Sidhu, I would like to thank Mr. Hanna and his family for all the contributions to this fine city and for their service to this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. It's my pleasure to welcome my friend and the Mayor of Abbotsford, Henry Braun.
Thank you, Brian. MLA Gibson, veterans, council colleagues, family, and friends. On behalf of the City of Abbotsford and Abbotsford City Council, it is a privilege to take part in this ceremony as we honor the centennial year of Sergeant Major Robert Hill Hanna receiving the Victoria Cross. As this evening's MC has already stated, Robert Hill Hanna is one of Abbotsford's heroes, and we are very proud that he made Abbotsford his home and that we can call him one of our own. I understand that on the surface, Robert Hanna was like many of our pioneers who built this community. As a young immigrant, he must have had a sense of adventure, an entrepreneurial spirit, a hope for something new and challenging. He must have had perseverance and a strong work ethic. Robert Hanna built roots in Abbotsford after World War I, first working in the logging industry in the Mount Lehman area where he was a log scaler and broker. He owned property on North Bradner Road, and during this time he donated some of the land to expand the playground of Jubilee Elementary School. He eventually sold this property and bought 10 acres near the corner of Ross Road and what is now Fraser Highway. Here he took a new direction and started farming, growing seed potatoes, in fact. This is where he lived and worked until he passed away in 1967 at the age of 80. While living in Abbotsford, Robert met Meg Gillis, a local young lady from Mount Lehman, at a weekly dance at the Mount Lehman Community Hall. After a short time, they married and had 2 children. One passed away in infancy. Bob Jr., however, who is here with us today, grew up in Abbotsford. Attended Mount Lehman Elementary School, Mount Lehman Junior High, and graduated from Abbotsford Senior in 1956. Robert's story may sound like many of our residents who built their lives in Abbotsford. However, as other men and women of Robert's generation, World War I broke into what was a normal life. And this called for ordinary people to do extraordinary things. For Robert Hanna, the first step was joining the Canadian Expeditionary Force, which eventually brought him to Hill 70 on August 21st, 1917. A battle that Professor Slade will tell you more about in a few minutes. Logger, farmer, husband, father, a community-minded man, Robert Hill Hanna is one of Canada's war heroes for receiving the highest military award of the Commonwealth for his leadership, quick thinking, and incredible courage during this battle. He was an ordinary man who did some extraordinary things to protect lives. Fixed on the Victoria Cross given to Robert Hanna just a few months after the battle are the words "in valor." Valor is not a word we use very frequently today. It refers to great courage in the face of danger. With it comes an air of dignity, an air of respect and solemnity, which is very appropriate when honoring and remember the soldiers who sacrificed their lives to defend our country so that we can live in peace, freedom, and security. Today we remember Sergeant Major Robert Hill Hanna's tremendous acts of courage on August 21st, 1917. Although this took place 100 years ago, thousands of kilometers away, it still resonates with us today. By remembering, we keep Robert Hill Hanna's story alive for future generations. Remembering helps us to realize that our freedom and way of life has come with a cost and should never be taken for granted. So thank you for coming out today, and to Robert Hill Hanna's family and all the military and cadet units, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Abbotsford Police Department, and veterans, thank you for helping us to remember today. This plaque will forever be a reminder to future generations of the incredible valor of one of Abbotsford's own, Sergeant Major Robert Hill Hanna. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Now, as they say, stick to the script, and I apologize. Megan, Royal Canada, Sergeant Major.
Wanted, shut!
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons' command, car ton bras se porte l'épée, il se porte la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. on guard for thee.
Sentry, stand at ease.
Order, march. Stand at ease.
Speak about embarrassing moments. I'm very sorry for that. Now we'll hear from Councillor Patricia Ross, has a very interesting, well, let's say a true story from her family's past. Patricia, could you come up, please? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am very pleased to be here to honor the sacrifices of Sergeant Major Robert Hill, Hanna, BC. I read the story of his extreme bravery and courage, which resulted in him receiving the Victoria Cross, and I have to say I am in awe. And thank you to his family who are here today. I can't even imagine the extreme courage it took to do what he did that day, which resulted in him receiving this award, but I'm sure that it was not his only experience of courage during the war. Every single day, the soldiers woke up and had to face what they did, and it took such bravery I can only imagine. I am very grateful for his courage and the courage of all those who fought for our freedoms and quality of life. I didn't know this brave man, but my grandfather, George Henry Crossan, who is also Irish, by the way, was one of those men who fought in World War I, and I've been asked to share his story today and my own reflections on what I know of him and his sacrifices. Perhaps these two men crossed paths at some point, and I'm not sure if they have, but I'm sure they had some of the same experiences, and I'm guessing that's why I was asked to share a bit of a story about my grandfather. My grandfather's most significant battle was at Vimy Ridge, at the battle of the taking of a strategic position named the Pimple for its high ground. Whoever had that piece of land had a strategic advantage because you could see everywhere, and it was heavily defended by the Germans. The 46th, 48th, and the 50th battalions were the ones who took this high ground, and my grandfather was in the 46th. He was a sniper, so he should have been in a more protected position, but in this battle, the fighting was so intense and chaotic, everyone just needed to do what was required at the time, and my grandfather was in hand-to-hand combat 3 times in one day and lived to tell the tale. In the heat of battle, fighting for his country, he lost his cap. And in those days, it didn't matter why. If you lost a piece of equipment or uniform, you were severely reprimanded and or demoted and had to pay out of your own pocket for the replacement, which is what happened to my grandfather. He was also gassed twice with mustard gas. He was wounded in the leg after Vimy, somewhere between there and the Battle of Passchendaele. He spent 8 months in hospital before coming back home to Canada. Now, at memorial events, we always honor those who died in battle, as we should. But I think it is just as important to honor those who came home, because the toll of fighting in battle is severe, even if you survive. Those who died leave their bodies on the battleground. But even those who survive and come home leave a little bit of their spirit, their soul on that battleground. If you go to Vimy, you can actually feel it. My husband and I have been there twice, and I swear I can feel the spirits of the men who fought there. It's a very emotional experience. And standing behind one of the sniper plates where my grandfather may well have stood was a very eerie experience. I know now that my grandfather suffered all of his life from what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt. He was tortured his whole life by what he saw and what he felt he had to do for our freedoms and for justice. Before the war, pictures show a happy Irishman with a twinkle in his eye. Pictures after the war show no sparkle and no grin, only the ever-present feeling of fear and a haunting, the extreme guilt of taking of life and surviving when his buddies died. Those who survived their battles still gave up so very much, like their sense of true peace and contentment, of any chance of true happiness the rest of their lives for me and all of you. For my grandfather, the injury of PTSD was far greater, far more painful than the one to his leg and his lungs. Because I didn't know Sergeant Major Hanna, BC, I don't know if his experiences affected him like it did my grandfather, but I'm guessing it must have, at least to some extent, so his courage extended beyond the war. There would be times that he would be haunted, remembering the traumatic experience, and it takes great courage to work through that every day and to work and try not to burden your family with it. I'm always grateful for any opportunity to honor the great men like Sergeant Major Robert Hill, Hanna, BC, and others, because due to their extreme courage and sacrifices, I have freedoms and happiness that they would never truly enjoy, and I try to appreciate that every single day. Congratulations to the family for your father's well-deserved awarding of the Victoria Cross.
Thank you, Patricia. We have a keynote address. We're very pleased to have Professor Peter William Slade, please.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Councillor Ross. You've stolen a little bit of my thunder because I believe your grandfather was at Hill 70, so we'll get to mention him in due course. Anyway, 2 evenings ago, the CBC website had a report on the opening of the Hill 70 Memorial in France. And so, yes, there is one there now. And the report stated that Hill 70 was Canada's forgotten battle. And that's the case. But it's not been forgotten now. Anyway, starting the story back in Ireland, just say a few things about Robert Hill Hanna. He was born in Athnahuri, near Kilkeel, County Down, in Ireland, which is now Northern Ireland, that part. And he worked as a farmhand and came to Canada as a single man in 1905 when he was only 18, or 19. First he came to Brandon, Manitoba, worked as a farmhand. Then he moved to BC and got involved with logging on Stewart Island, which is a small island in Toba Inlet, which is off the mainland, but geographically it's northeast of Campbell River. And eventually he got to run that logging operation. And as Mayor Brown has pointed out, his coming here showed that he had a sense of adventure and an entrepreneurial spirit. I also think he showed great courage, initiative, and enterprise, and not least of all how brave he was to have come out at such a young age to a pioneering country. Just imagine that. And talking about pioneering country, at that stage, Abbotsford, the village, and around Mill Lake only had about 200 residents. Clayburn actually had 250, and there were other communities like Mount Lehman, which had actually even more established. And I purposely mentioned Mount Lehman because I wanted to mention the first settlers like Alderman Hawkins, Sam Lehman, and a certain sea captain called Captain Alexander Gillis, who came from Prince Edward Island through the Isthmus of Panama, and he had a son, Hugh, and a daughter, May. And May obviously is the May that married Robert Hill Hanna later on. When the Great War broke out, Robert Hill Hanna enlisted in Vancouver on November the 7th, 1914 with the 29th Battalion, nicknamed Tobin's Tigers. And the people from Abbotsford, a group of lads from Abbotsford decided to join up, and they decided to do that in September 1914, and they had to take the train from Mission City to Valcartier, Quebec. Apparently it wasn't possible to sign up in Vancouver in September. Anyway, the big training camp was set up in Valcartier. They were enlisted all on the same day, 23rd of September, and unfortunately for them they were sent to France 2 days later and arrived in time for the early battles in 1915, and most of them were killed, which was unfortunate. At that stage they hadn't got used to the fact that you can't send men walking across open fields into the teeth of machine gun fire. And they wanted the 7th Battalion, and the 7th Battalion, just like the 29th, they're perpetuated in our British Columbia Regiment today. Robert went to England. He left Montreal in May of 1915, so arrived a bit later, arrived in France in September of 1915, and the first recorded things from his records that I noted was that in April of 1916 he contracted measles, and then German measles, which I thought was ironic, and then got a cheek wound from shrapnel in June 1916. Now, fast forward to 1917, we know about the big battle of Vimy Ridge, April 9th to the 12th, 1917, which is a big hobby of mine, as most of you know. And later on, in 1917, the Canadians got to join the fray at Passchendaele in October and November. Now, in between that, and that's why it largely gets forgotten between those two big well-known battles, was the Hill 71, which occurred in August. Backing up a little bit, what are the reasons for the Battle of Hill 70 anyway? And I'd like to say Hill 70 and Lens because the two are really connected. Well, the reason that battle came apart was that in the summer of 1916, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig and the British Army wanted to mount another offensive in Flanders around Passchendaele so that they could break through to the coast, cut off the Germans from using the Channel ports, which they were doing to send out their U-boats across the Atlantic and sink with the shipping that was coming mostly from Canada, bringing or taking all sorts of necessary food and other essentials to Britain. So Haig wanted to attack Passchendaele, so he wanted a diversion. So he asked the Canadians to attack Lens, the city of Lens. And where is Lens? Most of you, I think, have probably been to Vimy Ridge, and if you go to the Canadian Memorial there and you walk on from the park to the memorial, and you walk to the other side, which is actually the front of the memorial, and stand somewhere near that wonderful statue of Canada Weeping, or Mother Canada, and you look across the Douai Plain, you see a couple of conical-shaped hills. Those are slag heaps, and those are the tailings from the coal mining that used to be done in Lens. So, and they're southwest of the city, so that gives you an idea. Lens is not very far away. It's between 10 and 15 kilometres, according to which reference you read. So, and the General Sir Julian Byng, who was in charge of the Canadians, Commander-in-Chief at Vimy, had been promoted to take over the British Third Army, and General now Sir Arthur Currie was given the command of the whole four Canadian divisions, that is the Canadian Corps. And Lens was strategic to the Germans because it was a coal mining town and it was a railway hub, and it was also linked to an important city that there was a hub for them, which was the city of Lille, which I know some of us have been to. Currie looked at Lens and saw that it was really rubble, and the Germans had reinforced the basements of the houses and with troop emplacements and also artillery emplacements. So Currie could see that to attack, a frontal attack was going to lead to a lot of lives being lost. And although the soldiers wouldn't have thought this at the time necessarily, Currie was always interested in saving lives. So he talked to Lieutenant Colonel Andy McNaughton, Canada's senior counter-battery artillery commander, and McNaughton said to attack Lens was, quote, a bloody fool idea. That was a joke, but it was true. Anyway, Currie proposed to his immediate British superior, the head of the British First Army, the commander, General Sir Henry Horne, and he said, look, instead of attacking Lens, why don't I attack that hill to the north of Lens, hill 70 metres above sea level? And the idea there was that the Germans won't expect that, and although it's well fortified, if we ourselves put a diversionary attack on the southern part of Lens, where they'll expect us to attack, we can attack and take hill 70, and then we'll be above them, which will make a change. And he said they won't want us to be there, threatening them and being able to see everything we do, and they'll counterattack us like crazy, and then we'll be able to having set up our machine guns and our artillery, we'll be able to inflict heavy casualties on them. So Horne didn't expect a subordinate officer coming up with an alternative suggestion, particularly a colonial, one expects. But after consultation with Haig, it was agreed to change to Currie's plan, and Haig thought it would fail. But it didn't fail. The Canadians planned just like they did for the attack on Vimy Ridge. They trained the troops, rehearsed with battlefield models, tapes on the ground, just, apprised everybody of what exactly their role would be in the attack. And the artillery did its job as at Vimy, with parting the German artillery positions, and counter-battery fire destroyed 40 out of 102 artillery positions on the hill, cutting barbed wire and destroying trenches. Now, the original plan was to start on July the 31st, the same day that the British were going to attack Passchendaele, but that was delayed for a couple of weeks. And when the attack was made, Currie used soldiers from the 1st and 2nd Divisions, 2 brigades from each, for a total of 7 battalions. And from the 2nd Division, which is where the 29th Battalion, Robert Hill Hanna's battalion, they were in the 6th Brigade. Well, from the 2nd Division, the 4th and the 5th Brigade were chosen. Robert Hill Hanna's division battalion wasn't chosen. You might think, hey, wait a minute, we thought this is where he did his wonderful acts of bravery. Well, hold on, that comes a little later. And the 4th Division was also used, 1 brigade from that, to actually make an attack on Lens, to make the Germans think that the attack was going there. And that worked as a diversion. They diverted all of their artillery. So, okay, on August the 12th, the Canadians attacked at 04:25 hours, 4:25 again, on a 3,700 metre front behind a rolling barrage moving just ahead of them, which worked so well at Vimy Ridge. And at the same time, engineers fired 3,500 barrels of burning oil, creating a thick smoke screen, along with 900 gas shells. Yes, we use gas as well. And they made the attack from the west side of the hill. And within 20 minutes, the leading wave of artillery captured the first objective at the base of the hill. And the 7th Battalion of BC had a bit of trouble in the centre of that, but they managed to overcome. And some soldiers, after about an hour, reached the second objective, the crest of the hill, and eventually the third, which was low on the reverse side. Now, despite the fact that the advance seemed to go very quickly, and it did in war terms, the ferocity of the fighting was intense, and that should be stated. And there was a VC1 in that early part, Private Michael O'Rourke of the 7th Battalion. There's a BC regiment's battalion, so I had to mention him. He won his VC. He was a stretcher bearer. He rescued wounded men almost continuously, despite being nearly killed by machine gun fire on 3 occasions. And so, as Currie and Horn predicted, once the Canadians had achieved the objective of taking Hill 70, the Germans launched counter-attack after counter-attack, to a total of 21 altogether, even starting at 8:15 in the morning, which shows you how quickly the Canadians had taken Hill 70. But anyway, this time the Canadians were on the high ground and the Germans were coming up across open area, which is a bit of a switch from the way it was at Vimy and the way it often was. And this is an example of a bite, hold and destroy operation, as opposed to a bite and hold, which the earlier ones were, what the Canadians were involved in. And yes, the Canadians were set up with a lot of heavy Vickers and Lewis machine guns and other artillery, for a total of 250 machine guns, and the Germans were charging in broad daylight. And however, they kept trying, even though they took very heavy casualties. And on April the 18th, they actually introduced a couple of things that the Canadians hadn't seen before. Flamethrowers, and as Councillor Ross mentioned, using mustard gas, which is actually a liquid, but it's fired in shells, and you don't notice it at first because there's a slight smell of mustard and maybe you sneeze a bit, but after it gets on the skin and you absorb it into your throat and lungs, it blisters, and so it's really very nasty, and eventually after a couple of days soldiers would go blind and then die. Anyway, Canadian casualties at this stage were between 5,400 and 5,600, and the Germans were supposedly 15 to 20,000. However, the Germans refused to give up their position in the rubble of the city of Lens, so Currie decided to try and attack on Lens itself. And this was set for August the 21st at 04:35 hours, and this used the 2nd and the 4th Division and the one of the battalions from the from the 2nd and the 4th, and this time the 6th Brigade of the 2nd Division, which included the 29th Robert Hill Hanna, his battalion was used. And from the 4th Division, and one of the 3 battalions used there was the 46th, the Saskatchewan Battalion, which was Private George Henry Crosson's battalion. Now, Curry shouldn't have done this because the Canadians hadn't planned this attack. They had no experience of fighting in a city amongst rubble, and in fact, it turned out to be a mistake. But anyway, before the end of that, as they were preparing themselves for the attack at 0435, the Germans suddenly at 4 o'clock opened up an artillery barrage, and at about 10 minutes before the Canadians were ready to start, the Germans launched a bayonet charge, and specifically against the 29th Battalion. So there's different ways that this is interpreted by different, if you look at different references, but I'll go with the one that's done by a current noted researcher, person that's the curator in the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, that the company sergeant major, as he was then, Robert Hill Hanna, and his company were facing this bayonet charge, and in fact they got pushed back by the Germans, and the Germans set up a strong point in one of the Canadian trenches. So obviously the 29th attacked that. 3 attacks on the strong point failed, and they suffered heavy casualties, including all of their officers killed or wounded. And at this point, Robert Hanna assumed command of the remaining force of a few men, led them through the barbed wire against the German strong point that was holding out. And leading a fighting by example, Hanna managed to kill all 4 defenders, 3 with the bayonet and 1 with his rifle butt, silenced the machine gun and captured the position. And for that he won his Victoria Cross. Tremendous show of bravery, which was suggested by what Mayor Brown and myself had said at the beginning about how brave he was to come out when he did to British Columbia. Well, after they got back their trench, and some of the other battalions, Canadian battalions, had actually been able to go across no man's land to the outskirts of Lons, and Sergeant Major Robert Hill Hanna and his company were able to join them then, and they got as far as Cinnabar Trench, which was their objective, and but not just them, but the other Canadians found that in that particular situation they didn't really have much cover. They were exposed. They were in the city, street fighting, and so in the end they actually went back almost to their starting point. And on August the 22nd, according to material that I found, Private Crossan was actually wounded by gas, as it states in his report. But he did survive, as you know, and survived the whole war. There was another small action that the Canadians tried on one of those slag heaps that I told you about, but I'll cut that out because of time. And they weren't able to, they did take that, but they were pushed back and some of them had to surrender. So, first of all, if you recall, if you've been listening carefully, the first set of casualties on taking the hill were 5,400 to 5,600, when in crossing Canada another 3,300 on that second part, for a total casualty loss of almost 9,000, which compares to Vimy Bridge of 10,600. But anyway, it was considered to be a success. The first part, the Hill 70 part, was quote unquote something like, it was as well executed a battle plan as could have been expected at the time. But even though the second part of it, the attack on the city of Lens, was really a disaster, the whole thing still was a success when you consider, in terms of casualties, the Canadians about 9,000 and the Germans estimated to be about 25,000. On the CBC website, the fellow said between 20 and 40,000. That's possibly an exaggeration, but anyway, the Germans lost a lot more than we did. and it did prevent, as the Germans admitted, them sending a couple of divisions to Passchendaele, so Haig got his diversion. Anyway, I was going to say quickly that, as I mentioned earlier, that a memorial has been built on Hill 70. There's a couple of plaques on a gate post at the on the way to Hill 70, and they were placed there in 2008 by the regiment. And they're at the more or less the top of the hill. The Hill 70 Memorial now that's just been built was all done by private funds. A person called Hutchins and managed to raise the funds, and the patron is the Governor General. And the city of Longzon-Gohel donated the land, and that was inaugurated on April the 8th, and they had a ceremony there 2 days ago, which would have been the August the 22nd anniversary. Just finishing off here, some important information about Robert Hill Hanna. Later in 1917, he went to officer training school in England and graduated as a lieutenant, so he finished up as lieutenant. He was transferred to the Canadian Forestry Corps, which is not surprising, being in the lumber business, and served in a couple of companies there, survived the war, obviously, and returned to Kill and then to BC. He carried on his logging operation, and obviously he must have come to Mount Lehman in the 1920s. He married May Gillis in 1930, continued the logging business until 1938, when he retired from that, moved back to Mount Lehman, and Mayor Brown has given you all his history from then on. He died in MSA Hospital, which is no longer here, of course, and it was just one day before there was going to be a reunion of the Canadian Victoria Cross winners with the Governor General. I would have mentioned this, so he missed out on that. May Hanna died here in 1993 and was buried in Mount Lehman Cemetery, along with Captain Alexander Gillis and other members of the Gillis family, including Sergeant Murdoch Gillis. And Robert Hill Hanna, his parents being a member of the Orange Lodge in Nahuri in Ireland. He had actually joined the Lodge number 2226 in Vancouver when he came out, and he's buried in the Masonic Cemetery in Burnaby. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Actually, Peter, I asked you to stay here for a second. Any questions? Because Peter has a great deal of knowledge, and it won't take us quite as long, I'm sure. Any questions from the audience? I have a neighbor in Mount Lehman. Yeah.
Sentries! Attention! Sentries! Stand! 8! Sentries! Attention! Sentries! Stand! 8! Stand! Easy! Relax!
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Roger Ferrand. Are you here, Roger?
Over here, bud.
A good character. He gave me a poem here, which I really like. I think that the members of the BCRs, the different knots, will love this. Can you imagine marching along, you hear, sound off, all this kind of stuff? Well, this is in World War I, and I think, Roger, if I'm correct, this is your uncle, great uncle?
Well, he was no.
Anyway, a family member, we'll say, that gave Roger this poem when he was very young. We're the Dukes of Connaught, and we're damn good shots, and we're off to help the Tommy beat the Hun. And while we're over there, you bet we'll do our share to fight the battle till it's 1-1-1. Reminds my grandmother, she used to sing Barney Google all the time. Sticking to the script here this time. We have a member of the BC Legislature, Simon Gibson, here. Simon, were you going to say a few words, or nothing prepared? You want to say hello?
Just good to be here. Thank you so much. This is a real privilege to be here on behalf of provincial government. And that's all
Thank
I'd
you,
like to
Simon.
say. Thank you so much.
Is there any other elected officials here? I know I've mentioned Sandy before, of course. If we could have Bob Hanna, and Colonel Hawthorne, please come to the pedestal, the easel. Was there a Archie, were you going to come or not? Testing, testing. Without further ado then, let's just pull the this is a wonderful tribute. We're extremely proud of this. This is wonderful, and I think the city of Abbotsford certainly is too. And I think Henry has mentioned that it's going to be quite the thing. Colonel, would you read what's on it?
75361, Sergeant Major Robert Hill Hanna, BC, 1887 to 1967. 29th Canadian Infantry Battalion, Vancouver, Canadian Expeditionary Force. On 21 April 1917, Sergeant Major Hanna was awarded the Victoria Cross for most conspicuous bravery in attack at Hill 70, Lens, France, when his company met with the most severe enemy resistance and all the company officers became casualties. A strong point, heavily protected by the resistance, and all the company officers became casualties. A strong point heavily protected by the wire and held by a machine gun had beaten off 3 assaults of the company with heavy casualties. Under heavy machine gun fire and rifle fire, Hanna coolly collected a party of men and, leading them against this strong point, rushed through the wire and personally bayoneted 3 of the enemy and brained the 4th, capturing the position and silencing the machine gun. This most courageous action displayed courage and personal bravery of the highest order at the most critical moment of the attack, was responsible for the capture of a most important tactical point, and but for his daring action and determined handling of a desperate situation, the attack would not have succeeded. For Sergeant Major Hanna's outstanding gallantry, personal courage, and determined leading of his company, he was decorated with the Victoria Cross presented by His Majesty King George V at Buckingham Palace on 5 December 1917. The 29th Canadian Infantry Battalion, Vancouver, Canadian Expeditionary Force, is perpetuated by the British Columbia Regiment, Duke of Connaught's Own. Thank you.
Our unit's Padre, Michael Collison, could you come up and give us a blessing?
Let us pray. We'll begin with a lament from Psalm 88, and then we pray. Lord, you are the God who saves me. Day and night I cry out to you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. I am overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like one without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave. But I cry to you for help, Lord. In the morning my my prayer comes before you. Eternal God, you are refuge and strength in times of trouble. On this day, we remember all who experienced the battle at Hill 70, those who faced the terrible carnage and the devastation, who fought against all odds. We recall with thanksgiving the loyalty shown amongst soldiers and the bravery of those who overcame their fear, the courage of those who daily faced the pounding of artillery, gunfire, and shrapnel. May we never forget the devastating loss of this battle, the sacrifices that were made, the grieving of the many who lost loved ones, and the impact it has had upon this area of France and turning point of the war. Accept our sorrow for those who fell in battle, our gratitude for the freedom won by their sacrifice, our pain for the conflicts that still engulf the world, and our hope that we, with all who gave their lives, might journey to you in your safekeeping. Through our remembrances today, strengthen our resolve to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to speak your word of peace in times of conflict and insecurity. Give us strength to face the future, humility and wisdom to learn from the past, as we remember those who have given their lives in the service of peace and justice. We reflect on the Apostle Paul's words to the Ephesians. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. We thank you so much that Sergeant Major Hanna displayed these qualities of discernment, leadership, and courage, that we can be here together today. We ask for your blessing for his son, Bob Hanna Jr., and representatives of the family here present. And we thank you for the continued courage and commitment of his regiment even today. May the light of Christ lead us out of the valley of the shadow of death, on the paths of reconciliation, forgiveness, and peace. For the sake of the world your Son came to save. This we ask in the name of him who is the Prince of Peace. Amen.
Thank you, Michael. I believe this is when we have Sergeant Major ask for Bugler. Minute of silence, please.
Sentries, wanted, shut! Ladies and gentlemen, please rise.
Sentries, stand at ease. Stand easy.
Thank you. As you can see, we're almost winding down here. I wanted to, if I wasn't forgetful, there'd be another presentation, but we're going to do it at Mount Lehman. I forgot the plaque for Bob. Sorry, Bob. A personal, smaller plaque. I wish to thank, in particular, the City of Abbotsford and the Community Service Special Events Coordinator, Barb Roberts. Are you here, Barb? Great job. Thank you very much. I don't know if the Legion, the Abbotsford Legion, is going to be open. Is that correct? Can somebody tell me that? But anyway, is there anybody here from the Aldergrove Legion? And this open, is that correct? It will be. However, we have an official reception at the Mount Lehman Army and Navy Air Force Veterans. One of our members made up this nice map to get there. Hopefully, if you don't know where it is, it's quite easy to find. There'll be sandwiches, coffee, and I believe there's a bar. Is that right, Grant? The bar is open. We'll conclude by having Megan come back with the Queen.
Sentries, attention! Sentries, dismiss!
Major.
Stand fast, the sentries! Take up your position! Stand fast! Stand fast! Take up your position!
Major Ted Lindsay, please. Got it? We do it on Monday. Ted and Martin Major one. Sorry. We're good. Thank you. That was with respect to what I forgot to bring. So, Megan?
God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen, God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
Sergeant Major, stand at ease.
Sentries! Stand on! Ice! Stand easy! Stand fast on dismissal. I'll take the dismissal. All right, most of them. Sir. Are we done?
We're done.
All right. First thing we're going to do is we're going to march off the colors. We'll give the salute. The word of command will be present arms. That's going to be your cue. Don't need you in the slope right now. Present arms, and on the attention, cut the arms away. Are there any questions? Steady up the sentries. Sentries! Attack! Sergeant arms! drop colors. Sentries to your colors.
With the right.
Present.
Right. Turn.
Ah!
By the right. Quick. March.
Sentries! Attention! All right, listen up here. I want to thank everyone who participated in this particular event. In particular, I'd like to thank the cadet from 861, Abbotsford Police, and the RCMP, and of course, the historical sentries, and last but not least, my Dukes. Up the Dukes!
Up the Dukes.
Up the Duke!
Sentries! As detailed, dismiss! Sir.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. The event's concluded, but could you do us a favor to help the city of Abbotsford out? We'll fold up the chairs and we'll help Barb bring them back to City Hall.